This is the story of a human soldier who was declared dead in the middle of an alien surgical bay. The monitors flatlined, the rites began, everyone believed he was gone. But what happened next left the entire medbay frozen in disbelief. Lieutenant Mark Preston lay face down in something that looked like dirt but wasn't. It felt like wet graphite and smelled like motor oil mixed with cinnamon. Blood filled his mouth, coating his teeth. His left arm, burned and covered in armor, twitched weakly. A large piece of sharp metal stuck out of his right thigh. The pain came in heavy waves, deep and sickening. The last thing he clearly remembered was the ground exploding beneath him after a Crick's demolition drone attacked. He heard a high-pitched whine, had a quick thought, too late, and then it felt like being hit by a truck. When the recovery shuttle landed, medbots began scanning the battlefield, marking those who were dead, missing, or still savable. Mark's ID tag was still blinking, barely. His breathing had already stopped just seconds before the scan reached him. Inside the Redaxian surgical bay, 3 sharp-looking turquoise-skinned doctors stood over his still body. The lead surgeon Vel had 4 quick, precise arms. He had treated humans before. He respected how bold they could be, even if he didn't understand it. This one fit the pattern: heavy blood loss, serious injuries, broken bones, and based on the unstable readings, his heart had stopped on the way in. Vel got to work quickly. The medical table scanned and isolated the wounds, detected internal bleeding, and flagged a dangerous spinal injury at L2. Simulated chest compressions started. Tiny nanobots were released into the bloodstream to try and save him. Then the monitor went flat. No movement, no spikes, no signs of life, just silence. "Cardiac activity has ceased," said Medbot I-9. Its mechanical voice was soft but final. Vel exhaled through his cranial vents. "Time of cessation logged. Begin ceremonial protocol." The room dimmed to a deep violet. A soft harmonic vibration filled the bay. And a Redaxian death rite, a solemn honoring. It was not religious. It was scientific reverence for neural silence. The universal stillness that meant data, identity, being had concluded. Mark's armor was cut away with care. A crystalline mist was applied to his face, signifying peace. Vel clasped his upper hands. "Heave surfed outside his instincts," he intoned. "We honor the cognition that braved the unknown." Suddenly Mark gasped. The kind of gas that rips air like claws. His back arched. Monitors flared back to green. The mist of reverence was blown off as he coughed, groaned, and grabbed at the table's edge. Bloodied fingers clenched against the smooth surface. One eye was still swollen shut, but the other locked onto Vel's with bewildered rage. "Did we win?" Mark croaked. I-9 recoiled and spun 2 full circles. Error. Neural activity detected. Subject is active. Active! Vel's hands hovered mid-air, unsure if to intervene or flee. No. Impossible. Mark tried to sit up. His leg screamed and he dropped back. "I'm fine. Just fix the leg. I've got to get back out there." "Sir?" Vel said, searching for protocol in the med table's interface. "Your cardiac function ceased. By our metrics, you expired. Your systems reached zero continuity." Mark snorted and winced. "Then I guess your metrics suck." "You were clinically dead," I-9 stated. Mark blinked hard. "Maybe, but I'm not now. Are we going to argue or patch this leg?" The Iridiaxiom team exchanged rapid pheromone pulses. Vel opened a new file on the console. Title: Resuscitation Anomaly. Human type, soldier. Subtype, obdurate. "Stabilize him," Vel said finally. "Full scan, verify bone fractures, blood volume, neurological function." 4 rib fractures, non-displaced, I-9 read aloud. "Fracture to right femur, penetrating wound, partial vascular tear. L2 vertebral compromise, no spinal cord laceration detected." "Pain level?" Vel asked. "Severe," the bot answered. "Human pain tolerance registering at high threshold, cortisol levels unstable." Mark lay back, breathing ragged. Still got that pain suppressor you used on the last guy? The one with the purple tail? Vel nodded, incredulous. You're referencing Commander Jean. That was for post-separative recovery. Well then, hit me with it now. I've got at least 3 buddies unaccounted for. If I can stand, I can shoot. Bell hissed, a noise of disbelief, not aggression. You cannot return to combat. You were clinically deceased. Mark stared at the ceiling. Then today's a bonus day. Let's not waste it. An hour later, Mark's leg was stabilized with an external fixator. His ribs were wrapped tightly beneath a temporary pressure vest, and his back braced to avoid further vertebral damage. He couldn't walk unaided, but he could move. When Vel offered to sedate him for transport, Mark declined. Just strap me in and point me toward HQ. There's still a mission. The alien doctors stood in a wide semicircle, not entirely sure if they were witnessing bravery or stubborn biological malfunction. Vel turned back to his console and updated the case file again, this time under Medical Phenomena Human. Status: returned from cessation, action taken, re-engaged mission. He stared at the blinking cursor before typing one final note. Conclusion: with humans, the end is only sometimes the end. Mark didn't return to the front, not yet. Despite his insistence, Command overruled him after a terse audio transmission revealed he'd flatlined mid-surgery. You are not stepping into another combat zone until a proper neurological assessment clears you, barked Colonel Reeves, who sounded more shocked than angry. So Mark was moved, stretchered, via zero-grav med pod to the central triage dome on Iridax Outpost 14. The air inside smelled like sanitizer, copper, and plastic. Every alien eye he passed followed him. Whispers filtered through the curved walls, not in English, but tone carried far. He'd become the soldier who died and got bored of it. The medical team kept him sedated the first night. The fixator on his leg needed readjustment after his impromptu reawakening dislodged a stabilization pin. By morning he was lucid, hungry, and in the mood for answers. A droll physician named Meph approached his bed. The droll species were sinewy and tall, with skin that pulsed faintly depending on mood. Right now, Meph's glowed a curious amber. Your brain activity post-revival was erratic, Meph said, tapping a digital chart. Theta wave spikes followed by dreamless REM. Very uncommon. Your body fought for reboot, as if unaware of death. Mark raised a brow. What does that even mean? Meph hesitated, selecting each word with care. You didn't restart. You resumed. There was no external trigger, no shock, no defibrillation. We were performing rites when you returned. Must be a human thing, Mark muttered, biting into the protein bar someone had left at his bedside. We don't quit easy. That's not medically adequate, Meph replied. We need biological markers, genetic hints, some indication this wasn't chance. Your cortisol remained dangerously high during cessation. That's not normal. Mark tilted his head. You're saying my stress levels brought me back to life? No, we're saying you didn't follow the rules of cessation, which means either we misunderstand human limits or you're an outlier. Can't it be both? The next 2 days were a mess of tests. Neuroimaging, muscular response calibration, blood work comparisons against other human baselines. A Vol medic tried replicating the incident on a neuroemulator and almost fried his equipment. Every diagnostic contradicted the previous. Human biology, already known for its regenerative stubbornness, was now rewriting interspecies trauma protocol. Meanwhile, Mark struggled with rehab, not heroic push-through-the-pain grit, real, excruciating effort. His legs screamed with every supported shuffle to the therapy mat. His ribs throbbed even when breathing shallow. He couldn't lie on his back more than 10 minutes without his vertebra locking into fire. By day 5, the therapist let him try the exocrutch. His arms shook as he maneuvered around the room, sweat coating his temples. He didn't joke. He didn't wave off help. He let himself grimace, breathe hard, and pause when it hurt. And it did. Constantly. Every alien observer expected bravado. Instead, they saw the opposite. A man crawling out of physical ruin, one gritted tooth at a time. Vel visited again, standing beside Meph at the doorway while Mark practiced moving from bed to seat. Eater is not cavalier, Vel admitted, surprised. No, Meph agreed, just relentless. That evening, Mark was cleared to attend a controlled debrief. No armor, just a medical wrap and a brace on his back. The room was half observation suite, half command post. A human analyst named Joanna Chang nodded to him as he entered, and two Iridaxians studied him from behind protective glass. "Lieutenant," Joanna began, "you understand what you've done isn't just uncommon, it's biologically unprecedented." "I didn't do anything," Mark said. "I got blown up, then I woke up." "We've seen cessation reversal with humans," she clarified, "but never without intervention. No adrenaline, no shock, no hypoxia delay, it just happened." "Luck, maybe," he offered. Joanna looked unconvinced. "Luck doesn't produce a cardiac spike like yours. Do you remember anything during the flatline window?" He shook his head. "Just pain before. Then I was not gone exactly, it was quiet, like floating in dark water, but I could feel something, like I should be somewhere else, like being late to a meeting." Bell leaned forward behind the glass. "You felt urgency during cessation?" "Yes, urgency. Guilt, too. I wasn't done." Silence fell. No one typed, no one spoke. Eventually, Meph muttered, "Conscious intention during flatline. We're documenting that." Mark shrugged, but he looked tired. "I wasn't ready. That's it?" The session ended shortly after. Back in his room, he lowered himself into bed and stared at the ceiling. The adrenaline had faded. Pain was constant, fatigue bone deep. He wasn't fine, not yet, but he was moving forward. Just past midnight, a nurse entered, a species Mark hadn't met before, small, eyes like dark beads, nervous around humans. She checked his IV line and paused. "I read about you," she whispered. "My kind doesn't believe in return after cessation. We are taught that's impossible." Mark blinked slowly. "It usually is." "Then how did you do it?" He didn't answer right away. He closed his eyes. "I had friends still out there. I think I just couldn't leave them yet." The nurse didn't reply. She adjusted his cover and left. In the hallway, Vel updated his report one more time. Hypothesis: death is not an absolute in human experience. It is, perhaps, a suggestion. The formal clearance came 7 days after his heart stopped beating. Mark was allowed light duty, comms support, logistics coordination, nothing involving physical strain or high-threat zones. Not that he could do much more. He still walked with a limp, and every misstep sent pain shooting up through the brace into his lower back. But his hands were steady and his mind was sharp. HQ had reassigned him to Outpost 14's Interior Ops Wing. From there, he monitored encrypted field transmissions, organized evac routes, and flagged troop movements. It was grunt work, necessary but dull. The kind of assignment you got when people weren't sure if you should be breathing. Word had spread far beyond Iridaxian space. Other species sent specialists to study him. A pair of Ori medical tacticians visited with scanning visors and portable EEG readers. They asked him to recount the experience again and again, analyzing every pause in his speech, every blink. One asked to taste his sweat. Mark declined. He didn't mind the curiosity. What he minded was the quiet. No shouts, no gunfire, no muddy boots or tension before a drop. Now he sat in sterile rooms with wide-eyed xenologists, asking how it felt to die. "It didn't feel like anything," he told one analyst. "It felt like absence." "Of pain?" the analyst asked. "Knows how to find, of everything." He still got phantom pain. Late at night he'd feel the impact again, his body thrown mid-air, ribs folding in. The exact moment his heart had decided it had enough. Waking from that was harder than waking in the surgical bay. In those moments, silence wasn't peaceful. It was terrifying. A few humans from his unit visited once the med block lifted restrictions. Private Casey and Sergeant Miles arrived together, bruised but upright. Casey grinned when he saw Mark sitting on the edge of his bunk, one leg braced and held stiffly forward. "Damn, sir, we heard you died." Mark nodded. "Yeah, I did." And then came back? What, just got bored of the afterlife? Mark rubbed his temple. Wasn't much to see there, no lights, no tunnel, just guilt. Miles looked at him for a beat longer than necessary, then pulled over a stool. "We found Alvarez," he said. 10 clicks south of the crater. He was shielding 2 civis. Didn't make it. Mark's jaw tensed. "He was supposed to fall back. I told him—" "You were already down," Miles said gently. Mark didn't reply. They stayed a while, told him how the front had stabilized. The Crick's offensive faltered after their drone control relay was vaporized. Mark's mission, though bloody, had succeeded. The next morning, a soft chime alerted him to an incoming medical clearance update. Full duty status. Pending review in 2 weeks. Physical condition improving. Psychological assessment inconclusive. Observation recommended. He stared at that last line for a long time. Later that day, Vel entered unannounced. The Iridaxian moved slower now when approaching Mark. Not from fear, more like reverence, the way some approached uncharted terrain. "There's been a request," Vel said, holding up a tablet. "Another test?" "No, a field assignment." Mark raised an eyebrow. "I'm not cleared." "Not for combat," Vel replied. "But they want you to consult." A recon squad picked up faint distress signals near the outskirts of what used to be Sector 9. Civilian shelters may have survived, but the terrain is unstable. They want someone who's been through similar ground and knows human fallback protocols. Mark swung his legs off the bed slowly. "When?" 3 days. He agreed, before Vel finished describing the support gear. His back brace would stay. The leg would get a modular mobility brace that could compensate for low-speed maneuvers. No sprinting, no direct combat, just tactical observation and guidance. 3 days later, they landed on the crater's edge. Sector 9 was worse than he remembered. Melted metal ribs jutted from the ground like bones. Smoke still curled lazily from collapsed silos. The Cricks had moved out weeks ago, but the area hadn't healed. Mark stood, braced and sweating, beside 2 Iridaxian field scouts and a human pilot named Brenna. He adjusted the weight on his right side and scanned the terrain through a visor. "Signal was strongest near that collapsed entrance," Brenna said. "That was the shelter hub." Mark exhaled and nodded. "We'll go slow. That rubble's not stable." It took hours to traverse less than half a mile. Every few minutes, Mark had to pause, shift, rest his spine. But he didn't complain. When they reached the main hatch, the scouts used microsonic pulses to detect internal voids. "There's something down there," one confirmed. Mark leaned forward. "Then we dig." They found them 6 civilians, alive, trapped beneath a layered metal collapse that had sealed them inside with barely enough oxygen to last another 2 days. When the first child was lifted out, wide-eyed and shaking, she reached for Mark without hesitation. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt exhausted and wrecked. But the kid clung to him, and he held her tight. Bell reviewed the recovery feed back at base. Mark's vitals had spiked at multiple intervals, but his heart held steady. His bone recovery was still in progress, but inflammation markers had decreased. Most notably, his neurological scans during the field mission showed unusually high prefrontal activity, judgment, empathy, instinct. "He shouldn't have been out there," Meph muttered beside Vel. "No," Vel agreed. "But without him, those people wouldn't be alive." He updated the file once more. Conclusion addendum. In human behavior, cessation of function is not synonymous with cessation of purpose. 2 weeks passed before Mark stood without the brace. He didn't run, he couldn't jog, but he stood, walked, and climbed stairs with only a dull ache to remind him of the steel that once skewered his thigh. The fracture had knit well, helped along by precise microbone scaffolding and nearly a month of strict rehab. His ribs still pulled with every deep breath, but the bruising had faded. The brace on his lower back remained, though now as a precaution more than a necessity. He had officially been cleared for active duty again. Instead of returning to the front, Mark requested something unexpected. Time to speak to the medical teams that had treated him. Vel was the first to respond. He arranged a session in the observation chamber, where Iridaxians, Draal, Ori, Vuln, and even a few humans gathered in a semicircle. Meph stood off to the side, arms crossed behind his back. I-9 hovered in standby mode. They expected more tests, more stories, more analysis. Instead, Mark stood at the center, one hand resting on the console's edge. "I want to be clear," he began. "What happened to me wasn't a miracle. I didn't defeat death. I just didn't stay there." A flicker of movement passed through the audience. Even the Ori leaned slightly forward. "I flatlined, you declared me dead, and you weren't wrong to do that," he continued. "Everything in your training told you the same thing we believe. No heartbeat, no breath, no brain activity. That's the end." He looked down for a moment, remembering the sterile bay, the violet lighting, the mist on his face, remembering how cold his own fingers had felt when he woke. But humans, sometimes we don't go quietly. We don't always know when to quit. I didn't fight to come back. It wasn't heroic. It was stubborn. There were people still out there. I couldn't leave them behind. A drawl in the back asked, "Is that a common reaction in your species?" Mark gave a dry smile. "Yeah, more than you'd think." Vel finally spoke. "But there was no intervention, no shock, no pharmacological restoration. We did nothing." "You gave me enough time," Mark replied. "That's more than most get." Another voice chimed in, uncertain. "Are you different now, from before?" Mark hesitated, not because he didn't have an answer, but because he wasn't sure how to explain it. "I'm slower, stiffer. I wake up with pain every day," he said. "But yeah, I'm different." Silence filled the room again. "I'm not afraid of dying anymore," he added. "But I am afraid of wasting what I got back." That statement lingered longer than anything else he'd said. When the session ended, the crowd dispersed slowly, still processing. Vel approached as Mark retrieved his data chip. "You changed the way we define resuscitation," Vel said. "I didn't do anything you didn't already try," Mark replied. "Yet you returned. Without us. That changes our models." "Maybe update them to leave a little room for chaos," Mark said, tapping the side of his head. "Sometimes the heart knows more than the monitor." That evening, Mark returned to the Sector 9 site, this time as part of the reconstruction team. No weapons, just guidance. They were setting up a new permanent station, one that would stand above the old crater as a reminder of what had been lost and what had been saved. Brenna waved at him from the scaffold, still covered in dust and engine oil. "Back to supervising, Lieutenant?" "More like moral support," he called back. She grinned. "Glad your ghost didn't have any unfinished business." He didn't laugh, but he smiled. A child from the rescue, Nia, maybe 8 or 9, ran up to him holding a small pad. She had drawn something crude but recognizable, a figure with a brace and an exo support, standing tall in front of fire. "That's you," she said proudly. Mark crouched down, wincing just a bit. "You got the leg right, that brace was a pain." She beamed. "Mom says you're the reason we got out." Mark looked at the drawing again, then folded it gently and slid it into a pocket. "Nah, I just got lucky." "Is that why you came back?" she asked. He blinked, then stood slowly. Maybe I just heard someone calling." Later, as dusk fell and the dig lights clicked on, Mark sat at the edge of the crater. The surface had cooled. The soil no longer reeked of combustion. Just the scent of new structures and disturbed earth. Behind him, the reconstruction continued, slowly, deliberately, people lifting, carrying, rebuilding, living. Vel's latest report was already circulating. It would redefine emergency protocols across several systems. An entire chapter titled post-cessation human response had been submitted to the Allied Intermedical Authority, Mark's name appeared 5 times, always with an asterisk, a notation for the impossible. He didn't care about the attention. He didn't want another medal or citation. He only wanted this, to be useful, to stand, walk, build, and teach others that sometimes survival isn't about what gets healed. It's about what refuses to be lost. Mark Preston had died once, briefly, just long enough for the universe to try and tell him it was over. But he had things left undone, people left behind, and a body, broken as it was, that hadn't given up. So he came back. And every day since he made that return worth it.